Okay, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us. Pleasure to have everyone here. We're going to have a conversation on the future of aviation, innovation in a post-pandemic world, specifically looking at the one thing we all care about, which is travel, and how this affects us and the technologies that are relevant these days. We have a lot of topics to cover. I'm going to begin with a very quick overview of OurCrowd, and we're going to go through the different speakers. Stay tuned. I'm Lali David. I'm a partner and head of business development at OurCrowd. Pleasure to be here hosting this. OurCrowd, as many of you already know, is the most active venture capital firm in Israel. We've been very active in Israel, but also invest globally in funds and deal by deal. The way it works is that we choose companies and funds and different investment opportunities to invest in, and we invite the crowd. The crowd is a diverse crowd, including personal investors, accredited investors only, then family offices, institutional investors, corporate VCs, and others. We've already have more than 1.4 billion committed. We've vetted and looked at more than 10,000 different deals, invested directly in more than 200 companies, 22 funds, and going strong. The portfolio is very diverse. It includes companies in different stages and different sectors. We actually benefit a lot from the interdisciplinary nature of our portfolio. On the right side of the screen, you can see the different funds, whether it's funds where we secured an allocation for our investors to invest in as LPs in these funds in Israel and abroad, or we created our own fund like Cure and Digital Health. So this is a snapshot of different funds that we invested in: Maniv in mobility, Advantage in sport technologies, USVP in the Silicon Valley, F2 in early stage deep technologies in Israel, OFEC, and others. We also have 4 government-backed incubators here in Israel and 1 outside of Israel. We're very proud of the practice of the incubators nurturing and supporting early stage startups with the support and the backing of the government of Israel, the Ministry of Innovation, and the chief scientist. We invest alongside leading venture capital firms, leading angel investors, and collaborate in different ways with world-leading multinational companies, some of which are listening here to this webinar. We have significant partnerships with leading banks globally, very recently with Stifel in the US. This is a recent development for us that we're very, very proud of. We've developed OurCrowd Innovate, which is our way of interacting and providing innovation services to our corporate partners globally across different sectors. Some of them are listed here in this slide. Basically, we go through an innovation journey alongside the corporate partner, identifying the needs of the corporate partners and identifying the innovation blocks to address these needs. These blocks are generally categorized according to knowledge, engagement, and community. I'm going to introduce you now to Dan Fischel, who leads OurCrowd Innovate and done a lot of research on how innovation should be looked at in these times of crisis. Dan, please share with us your screen and let's hear a bit of your findings. Thank you.
Thank you, Lali. I'm going to talk for 10 minutes about why we need to innovate, especially at times of crisis. Now, this pandemic, you'll agree with me, that is healthcare related in its nature. However, its implications in the medium to long term, I assume you'll all agree with me, are psychological in nature. So I assume some of you are familiar with the Kubler-Ross model. It's basically the way humans react to radical change. We also know it as the 5 stages of grief. I'd assume that most of us, definitely I am, is somewhere between depression and acceptance. I mean, today was the first day I got out of my cocoon, out of my apartment and came to the office, first day. However, there is another human psychological effect that we're all familiar with, maybe not by name, and it's called the mere exposure effect. And it's basically our very basic human need to focus on what's familiar, especially at times of crisis. Now, because humans are running corporations, last I checked, corporations tend to behave in the exact same manner, which is focusing on what's safe, on what's predictable, everything that's been working well, and it's part of the culture. That is very, very basic. However, this corporation that focus on what's safe and predictable, maybe some occasions also ignore what's related to innovation or any activity that is not revenue generating in the immediate term. Now, the reality is that just focusing on what's safe and predictable is bad for business. And if you go to the nearest corporate graveyard, there's plenty of companies that throughout the years played it safe and predictable for way too long after the economy has changed. Now, if you're looking at the lifespan of S&P 500 companies, Credit Suisse has found out that it's decreasing exponentially over the years. So it's about 20 years today, down from 60, and down to 12 in just a few years from now. Now, why this is happening? It's happening because of a phenomenon that we all know very well. It's called tech disruption. Tech disruption is basically taking one product or bringing to market a product that renders all the previous products obsolete. Now, this phenomenon has been with us since the Industrial Revolution. But the reality is that what's different now is that tech adoption happens at a rate that is much faster than ever before in history. So if you're looking at this chart, you could see that it took Americans about 50 years to adopt electricity in their homes. It took them just 20 to adopt a PC and just 10 to adopt a smartphone. So tech adoption has never been faster before COVID. But look what's happened after COVID or during it. It's up the roof. I think you would all agree that over the last couple of months, we've seen tech adoption at a rate never before seen in human history. And there are many indicators like Amazon, for example, hiring 100,000 employees just to meet demand. Ocado, it's the biggest online supermarket in the UK. Up until recently, they would put you on a virtual queue. You would wait for 2 hours just to get online and shop for groceries. Now that's insane. These numbers are insane. And you might make the case that for every company that is, has been played well during COVID, there's plenty others that don't, like Uber or Airbnb, and that's true. However, there's a few key differences. The first one is the tech adoption now reaches new demographics, like the elderly. It's changing, I would say, not just consumer behaviors, but just basic human behaviors. And if you're a corporation, it fuels a shift towards the cloud because the on-prem IT systems are not designed to support remote work. But just maybe a quick recap of what's happened here over the last couple of months. So in the UK Parliament, MPs can now vote remotely. In New York, you can get married via Zoom. In Israel, you can file a complaint with the police without coming to the station. We're all working from home right now. I mean, not myself, it's my first day in the office, but we're working from home and it's working, it's working. To the extent that the CEO of Morgan Stanley says they're gonna need much less real estate, and Barclays CEO says pretty much the same thing. And if we're looking at telemedicine, it's up the roof in demand. And if we're looking at the perception of telehealth during COVID-19, you would find out that about over 50% of Americans, they either tried it or are willing to try it. And those who already tried telehealth, 97% are not going back. And of course, when we're talking about online grocery shopping, my mom, for the first time after God knows how long, she finally agrees that someone else would pick her tomatoes, so basically order everything online. It crosses demographics. It's unbelievable. And when you look at the hard data, the numbers are mind-blowing. The sales are more than tripled. And there's so many first-time buyers, including the elderlies. So all of this tech adoption, it's not going back. Tech adoption doesn't reverse. There's not a single time in history when we've seen that it's actually going backwards. And if we have to put, if we have to put from a qualitative perspective on that same chart, what's happening right now, it's a straight line. It's like boom, up the roof, the digitization of what hasn't been digital so far. Just a moment to reflect that this is a unique time in human history where everything goes digital. Think about just how long it would have taken governments to, do online marriages, online weddings, or filing complaints to the police. 5 years, 10 years, happened overnight. One thing to think about. Second thing, we tend to look at automation, which is the process of machine replacing humans, as a straight line. Like every year, a little bit more automation is happening. But reality is not the case. Automation is centered around economic crisis. And we've seen it spikes in automation over the last 3 recessions. And it's happening because the relative cost of labor, when company revenue goes down, the relative cost of labor is going up. So companies are basically shedding employees. Now, the question is, what type of jobs are lost? And the vast majority of jobs that are lost have been lost in the past and are lost now are low-income, routine jobs that can be easily automated. And those employees, which unfortunately are not coming back to the workforce, are replaced with highly skilled employees and technology. So we can see here that the 2008 recession, there was an increase in the educational requirement, the experience requirement, the computer skill requirement. So what type of sectors are prone to automation more than others? Not surprisingly, and we see it right now, there's no hotels, there's no restaurants. I mean, accommodation and food services have the highest automation potential. So this is based on Brookings. It's a research institute based in DC. By the way, very similar data we can find from PwC. The automation potential of the entire US market is double digits, it's 46%. It's insane. The numbers are insane. And we're gonna see a very similar trend happening again now. Now, the question is, in what way this recession is different? So this recession is different because the number of unemployed is simply up the roof. It's 20 million now. It might go back to probably less, but most of the jobs lost are not coming back. The main difference is that today we have AI. We had AI maybe in the very early stages in 2008. In 2000, it was not existing really. And in 91, it was science fiction. So in what ways AI is gonna have an influence on our economy, it's yet to be seen. My guess is gonna be dramatic. So what's happening now? And in the post-COVID reality, we have to think about 2 terms. One is acceleration, which is basically the increase of the adoption rate of existing technologies for a given sector. For example, financial services would accelerate the use of digitization, which is an existing technology that is waiting for them on the shelves. They've simply been too slow to take it on. However, there is another term that's called transformation, and it's basically mean the application of new technology or the repurposing of existing technology to a new sector. And this is exactly air travel. So we can see that air travel is pretty much on the x-axis. It's very, very impacted by COVID. And there is a high need of repurposing of technology as opposed to other sectors that are affected to a different extent. So that was just a brief taste from the presentation, the longer presentation, the longer webinar that we're going to deliver next week, Wednesday, May 27th. We're going to talk about how would the near future look like for healthcare, for financial services, for retail. We're touching travel today, and for supply chain. We're gonna ask who are the real competitors in the new normal, and I'm going to give you a spoiler. They are called startups. And we're going to talk about what corporations do at the times of crisis. What's the right mix? And I'm going to give you a spoiler again. They have to work with startups. And lastly, we're going to discuss why the real vaccination to COVID is technology. So again, next week on May 27th, we're going to share the registration details with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dan. And we're going to move from the general discussion to the aviation context. And we have Yakir, who's going to go through recent research on how this different trends in tech are affecting the aviation industry in a very visual way. Thank you.
Hey, terrific. Thank you, Lali. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, this morning, this afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from. My name is Yakir, and I am a Director of Business Development and Mobility Lead in the OurCrowd team. So just starting off with a few numbers and a snapshot of the current COVID-19 numbers globally. This is up to date to last night, Israel time. Almost 5 million coronavirus cases so far globally, which some of them resulted in deaths, over 300,000. 2 million have recovered, and approximately 2.7 active cases remain. And this is, like Dan said, it's very much a global thing. It reached almost every corner of the world, still very active in North America and other countries. And in order to just put everything in perspective before we dive deeper into this, I want to kind of reflect over some pandemic history, going as back as the 14th century to the Black Death, the plague that basically affected almost a fifth of the population of the world at the time. It took almost 10 years to spread from Asia globally. Moving on to a century ago, to the Spanish flu, relying mainly on soldiers that were dropped to, that were sent to fight in World War I. It took less than 2 years to spread globally. While the origin is still uncertain, the spread is still, the spread rate is very quick, which brings us to COVID-19. Now, COVID-19, admittedly, the total number of infected people and the death toll are very low in comparison to the previous two examples, but COVID-19 took a mere 4 months to spread globally. And this is much attributed to the globalization that we're experiencing in pre-corona days. And you can't basically speak about globalization without talking about aviation. Now, aviation, of course, as we all know, it has a key role in globalization, in driving global trade, supporting e-commerce, leisure travel, open skies, you name it, it has a big role in that. So it's really no surprise, like Dan mentioned before, that aviation is much affected, is probably the most affected sector from this current outbreak. And it's, again, no wonder that the first restrictions were mainly on aviation and incoming passengers. And we started to see that as early as the beginning of February. And I think that Israel was probably one of the first countries to actually impose such restrictions. And other countries actually followed very quickly, and results were came immediately. So as we can see here, in March alone, 10% of passenger flights were already canceled. We saw 35% decline in cargo capacity, and over 61% decline in total flight volume in comparison to the numbers of the same period last year. And this is, you should bear in mind that this is in a period where we expected a growth, not a standstill or something like that, and instead we got a 61% decline. And some airports actually exhibited 90% decline in flight volume. Now, the aviation industry is no stranger to times of crisis. And of course, if we reflect in recent history over 9/11 events, the SARS outbreak, the 2008 financial crisis, all of them were accompanied with results, with effects on the aviation industry, where the 9/11 events basically caused a change in or in addition to the existing security measures at the time. SARS basically caused a loss of over $7 billion to the aviation industry at the time. And the financial crisis saw many bankruptcies of aviation companies, which led them to consolidation of the companies and M&A activity and so on. But this time we're looking at something much different than that. And we're looking at something that is much broader than that, and which requests, basically it entails, sorry, a shift in paradigm, an addition of a complete new layer. It's not just an addition of measures for the existing layer, it's a complete new layer that we define as biosecurity. So this is the change from the ordinary security to biosecurity. Now, if the term biosecurity, before I get into the term, this is kind of a good definition that I found of biosecurity that I think reflects this very well. So biosecurity refers to a set of preventive measures designed to reduce the risk of transmission of infectious diseases in humans, animals, and crops. And if the term biosecurity sounds familiar, you're probably very much familiar with the images on the right-hand side of the screen, which are the forms in which you need to state whether or not you carry food, you carry plants, leaves, whatever it might be, or such images such of sniffing dogs, or posters around the airport that basically urge you to declare any sort of these kind of items that you have in your baggage or in your holdings. Now, as we can see, this is Biosecurity 1.0. The focus was mainly on agriculture, animals, processed foods, and medicines, finding those aspects and controlling them. But not much of attention was given to the human factor. And according to that, and to provide that focus, we actually use measures such as X-ray, sniffing dogs, and governmental biosecurity reps that were actually present in the airport to provide such enforcement. Moving on to the future as we see it, Biosecurity 2.0 is much more focused on the human aspect. So the focus now would be on immunity passports, symptoms, screening for symptoms, screening for temperature, disinfection, sanitagging, which is basically tagging your baggage after it was sanitized to make sure that it's sanitized throughout its journey, and of course, social distancing. And this is not something that we came up with. This is all according to existing regulation that actually started to pop up by the leading, of course, the regulators, the FAA, the IATA, which are the Federal Aviation Authority and the International Air Transport Association, and of course, the World Health Organization. And what we see here, that the measures completely changed. As Dan mentioned, today we have AI on our side. And what we're seeing is that measures would be mainly relying on that. So AI, computer vision, contactless sensing, autonomous robots to replace human personnel, and of course, multi-layered bioscreening. These are just some of the measures that we're seeing, that we're predicting that would be that would be involved in the future of aviation and airports. Now, the Israeli point of view on that and the Israeli ecosystem has really responded very quickly to the abrupt change in the industry. And as we can see, these are, the main trend is that we actually see all hands on deck. All the ecosystem companies, no matter from what sector they are originally from, we're seeing a lot of focus, or new focus, or pivoting of technologies towards COVID-19. Mobility companies, energy companies, healthcare, of course, but other technologies like drones, semiconductors, optics, even agriculture solutions that are now having a pivot, and the underlying technology is being used for fighting COVID-19 in many ways. This is my last slide, and I want to kind of share with you a glimpse into what we expect to be the future passenger journey of aviation in after Corona world. So it's very this is kind of the flow that every one of us would probably go through coming into the airport. So starting at pre-screening, even before arrival, while in your car, you will be temperature checked. And there is an Israeli company doing exactly that, starting from vehicle inspection, now moving into, or adding at least, the layer of thermal checks. Some of the companies here are actually speaking after me, and one of those companies are Juganu, which are able to provide disinfection using UV lighting, which is using a wavelength that is completely safe for humans. VocalZoom would provide multi-sensory screening as you walk into the airport. And after on, if you so happily maybe failed the pre-screening, you would move on to screening confirmation, which will basically replace the PCR tests and the antigen tests that are known today, and would be able to provide in the future a 10-minute diagnosis in 10 minutes. So you wouldn't be held back for a few hours until the PCR tests come in. So you would be able to make sure that you make the flight in time. And of course, as we move on board the plane, as we move to boarding, there is a mistake, to security, sorry, my mistake. As we move to security, companies like SeeTrue will basically streamline the process, taking away the load from human personnel, and by that allowing for social distancing and of course, more streamlined security process. Then as we arrived into the lounge area, companies like Vayar or Soapy would basically influence your, would enforce sanitation and hygiene, as well as social distancing using radar technologies and using AI to make sure that you're actually maintaining your personal hygiene while you're washing hands. And when we're coming on to the boarding area, there is no longer, we're expecting that there would no longer be the long lines of people that are waiting to board according to their boarding class, but each and every one of us would receive a notification to our cell phone with companies like Neura, knowing exactly when is the right time for us according to our plane ticket and class and all of that, and the queue that is forming, when is the right time for us to get to the boarding gate, and will alert us just in time, and again, prevent social and enforce social distancing. On board the plane, companies like Tammy are providing robotics that will basically could replace flight attendants and actually provide other services and entertainment services throughout the flight with no human contact. And of course, at the destination airport, we're all prone to screening again and disinfection as we land. And this would probably help us in preventing quarantine for 14 days or anything like that. Border control, companies like CoreSight would be able to face detect everybody that come to the border control, even with a mask on our face, which is very timely. And of course, at the destination, companies like Air Doctor would make sure that we are staying in touch with our doctors in case anything goes wrong, in case we're feeling ill, and all of that would be reflected to the aviation companies. And with that, I'll end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yakir. We're going to move from Yakir to Asaf Frenkel, the CEO of SeeTrue. SeeTrue is already working with different airports on different needs, and now has been able to also address the need of enabling social distancing. Asaf is going to go through that. In the meantime, as Asaf is uploading the slides, I want to highlight to everyone that we have a Q&A box alive and active, so feel free to add questions to the Q&A box. And also that we're going to put in our chat box the registration links to the different webinars that we have upcoming, so that will be useful for you to sign up using the links. If Yakir could stop your slide.
Yeah, I need Yakir to stop the sharing.
Okay, thank you, Asaf. Maybe
Yakir
you can
needs
begin already.
to stop the sharing so I can share my slides.
Just a sec.
In the meantime, Asaf, if you can start with a quick
Yes, okay.
intro as you're uploading the slide.
Sure. 1 second.
Maybe in the meantime, I'll just say one question that was put in the Q&A is that it seems like we already know all the answers to all the questions. Are these technologies really there to address the different issues? So of course, some of the things that we're addressing are initial thoughts about the future of aviation and sort of the direction of where technologies will be heading to, and some of it as real products already integrated. So this is a great segue to SeeTrue.
Thanks, Lali, and it's a pleasure being here today. So the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the world. Commercial flights are down significantly, and we're here because we want flights back, and we want revenues back, and we want people to be safe. When Yakir mentioned before what airports need to do, he talked about the biosensing, but still we have all the legacy systems that need to be handled as well. If you look at this image here, you understand that these long lines are no longer practical and acceptable in the age that you need to keep social distancing. And this is where we are coming into play in SeeTrue, when we provide higher passenger throughput and enable opening glass bags to reduce the contact of security officers, bags, and passengers. We're not only doing that to enable the social distancing and to reduce the risk of infection, but also improve the operational efficiency and revenue for the airports that got the financial hit from the COVID-19. So we are a software company focused on security screening. We're already deployed in the field commercially, and today improve throughputs in airports around the world by more than 30%. This means that you can have lines shorter and have more social distancing. We're doing that on top of our proprietary technology with more than 200 patents in the field. And this is actually working, back to the question Lali answered. So let's see how it works. So we connect, if you can see on the top left, number 1, we connect to existing screening machines as you know them. When we want to when you want to improve the passenger throughput, you need to have a faster screening process and open less bags. In order to that, you need to find and open the right bags, right? You don't want to open irrelevant bags, and you don't want the screeners to stop and look too much at bags that they don't need to. This is what holds the queue. So we use artificial intelligence to analyze the images and data in real time and open only the bags that you need to open with the real threats. So if you look at the bottom left picture, number 2, you see that we detect prohibited items such as guns, knives, explosives, etc. And we are able to do that in a very low false alarm or reject rate, meaning that you open less than half of the bags that usually airports are opening today. This means that the entire flow is moving much faster. And in the example here, when you see that the operator do need to open a bag based on our recommendation, then he spends 3 to 5 seconds on it instead of 15, 20, or 30, and the bag is taken to the side to another operator. So in that time, the flow continues and you don't create the line and queue, and you can still keep the social distancing. And obviously, you want to find the threats and keep the security and even improve the security. So we enable social distancing and improving the business performance with our artificial intelligence. Once you enable higher passenger throughputs, higher social distancing, at the same time, you also take the passenger faster into the commercial area, which is the area in which airports are usually doing around 30% of the revenues. At these times, it's even more important to get passengers there as fast as you can. On the other hand, we also enable reducing the operational cost because we need less people to operate the screening. So first of all, you need less people to get exposed if you need also to manage shifts and manage different teams in quarantine if someone is infected, and you can spend less money on a non-revenue generating operations such as security. And we're doing all that while improving the security level itself, because the detection rates we're doing, which are over 90%, are not parallel to what operators are really doing. And for the sake of time, you can later Google latest news from TSA to see how detection rates found out that when there are less than 10% passengers, they find more than 3 times guns with respect to the size of the population, meaning that usually the actual detection rates are not as good as you would think. So some product highlights. We connect today both to X-ray machines and CT machines, also to the CT checkpoint machines, which are now introduced into the market. We can connect to any existing X-ray or CT machine. The airport doesn't need to change anything of its infrastructure. It's a software solution connected into the existing hardware that they have. We also provide a management dashboard to the operations of the airport so they can track and see what is going on, the pace, and fix if there are issues throughout the day, this is getting fixed. And we see some customers using it also to measure the SLA versus services companies that are doing, in some places, the actual security and provide the people. The integration itself is fast, and during this COVID-19 area in which we don't travel, we're able now to install the systems remotely, and we have now installations done remotely, and a system can be up and running in less than 2 months, in 4 to 6 weeks, and get the airport operations improved immediately. As I said, the system is already deployed. This is an example from one of our existing customers with more than 1 million passengers passing a year, with over 30% throughput improvement, improved passenger experience, improved dwell time in the commercial area, and now they're also benefiting from the ability to have better social distancing. So SeeTrue is a company working already in airports, already delivering operational results, enabling social distancing, but not limited to that. We impact the financial results of airports by reducing their costs and helping them improving revenues with better dwell time in the commercial areas. Doing all that, the company is improving the security results and reduces also the security risk, not only the safety now with COVID-19.
Thank you, Asaf. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Asaf, for the presentation. We're going to move to Tal Bakish, the CEO of VocalZoom, who's been able to in the past time to accelerate tech development of the technologies of VocalZoom to become very relevant for the use at airports. Tal, pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Lali. VocalZoom is a company who's doing laser sensors, tiny laser sensors for many types of applications. And during the COVID time, we partnered with a company called ANC in the US. ANC is a company that provides solutions for homeland security, especially security in airports. And together we're building what we call the Pandemic Business Continuity Platform, which is the broader aspect of screening in airports. And we're already in contact with many players in the US market, including government agencies like the TSA and the Department of Homeland Security, and also working with airline companies and other entities that are related to this aviation space. So the biggest problem we see today is that there's a high need to develop sensing technologies that are, first of all, contactless and can overcome large amounts of people going through airports, checking each person in a very short time frame. But more than that, we need to have a platform that takes the business aspect or takes the process aspect in terms of the regulation in airports. One of the things we see with many customers and many agencies in the US is that there's a need for some kind of standardization in order to solve the problem. And also you want to have some kind of worldwide pandemic detection system that tells you that many people have the same symptoms, because at the end of the day, there's no one symptom that defines. And we all know that some people have fever, some don't. Some people are coughing, some don't. So it's very important to cover a very wide range of symptoms and correlate that with different people in different areas, and also manage the whole system in a way that you can calibrate that depending on the situation, whether these are normal days or pandemic days. So what we are coming up with together with ANC is actually a multi-layer platform. The lower layer is where VocalZoom is actually developing the technology side. We're providing sensors, laser sensors, contactless, that can monitor a wide range of symptoms and features related to respiratory and heart rate and fever and other types of vital signs. Everything, of course, is contactless. The detection is done within 10 to 20 seconds per person, so it allows for a very fast screening. The second layer is that we're actually creating some kind of alliance that combines us as a technology provider together with the different agencies, both in terms of sharing knowledge and sharing data in real time. It's very important to know if you're if you're now in the mid of a pandemic, or if these are normal days, it's very important to know what's happening in other places. So there are sensor providers like us. There are also, like I mentioned, government agencies. There are the airline companies. There are the airports, who are the biggest companies to suffer from such a situation. So they have very strong incentive to cooperate. And the third layer, the upper layer, is where we actually fuse all this information and all this metadata together to make decisions that are both in the scope of the specific airport, but also in the scope of a country or a worldwide detection system. So this is a very large platform made of many components, but at the core of the platform, we have the VocalZoom sensing technology that covers a very wide range of symptoms that will fit not only for COVID, but also for other types of diseases in the future. Specifically about the first product, the phase 1, this is what you see on the screen. This is the first product that will come up in 6 to 8 months from now. And we will start deploying in airports, in selected airports in the US. The first deployment actually is not going to be in an airport. It's going to be in the Disney World gate. There's a saying in the US that when Disney goes back to normal, it means that the pandemic is off. So we're going to start from Disney. This system has VocalZoom sensors inside. It can detect different types of symptoms related to specifically COVID in the phase 1 within 10 to 20 seconds. So you can run many people for the initial screening. The installation is very simple. This is very important because we see that different airports and different situations in airports require to put the system in different locations in the airport. We're all familiar as Israelis with the fact that there are certain screening that is done at the gate for airplanes that go to Israel. So there are many reasons why to make it something that you can move from place to place, and you can install that in a very short time frame. We're capable of course, of doing contactless sensing, remote sensing, meaning that we're not touching the person. This also has a lot of implications. One part of it is security of the data and those kind of things, but the more important thing is the fact that anything that is intrusive, anything that requires special equipment or replaceable equipment like gloves and masks, everything has to be taken in account in terms of the business aspects and also in terms of the complexity working with many people in an airport. And of course, it's cost effective and safe and accurate. That's obvious. The system will cover a very wide range of symptoms, like I mentioned. Basically, the VocalZoom sensors start from sensing respiratory rate, heart rate. The sensors are also working as kind of a laser microphone to listen to sounds inside the lungs. So we can detect liquids in the lungs. We can detect, actually, it's like a laser stethoscope. Very similar to what doctors are using. And we're also capable of doing detection of voice biomarkers. Anything that you say, usually there are some kind of anomalies in your voice related to health conditions. This is known science, but we're going to do it much better with the laser sensors. On top of that, we're adding technologies related to hyperspectral imaging and fever detection, temperature detection. These are all off the shelf that are combined with the VocalZoom sensor. The system that we developed, this product that you saw, is actually for initial screening, meaning that we're going to identify suspects, and these suspects will go to a secondary screening, whether it's a PCR or some other kind of device that can provide a more reliable check, but it takes more time. So we're doing the fast screening for the majority of the people. But once we identify the suspect, it goes to the other technologies you're already familiar with that take between 5 to 15 seconds, to 5 to 15 minutes, sorry. We're seeing the need for these systems, not just in airports. We're seeing it, we're talking with factories like PepsiCo, for example, that expressed a lot of interest in monitoring their employees. when they're coming into a food factory. The downtime that happened in airports during the last 2 months, it happened everywhere, in factories, in amusement parks. So there are many, many places where you need such systems, and our system will be adaptable in terms of price and size and mobility to many types of scenarios where you need to deploy a health screening. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Tal. As Akir showed, we have technologies that are relevant in different phases of the aviation journey. And the last one we're going to show today is Juganu, which is very relevant in the context of disinfecting technologies, basically taking its existing product and adding additional technology capabilities to it that are very relevant in this specific context. I'm happy to introduce you to Shai, the Chief Sales Officer of Juganu, to share their deck.
Thank you, Lali. Thank you, OurCrowd team. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I think we've discussed a lot about the pandemic and the current status worldwide, so I won't repeat any of the statistics or anything that you've already known or familiar with within your regions. And I'll move to the solution that we started to develop immediately after the pandemic started. We decided to harness our technology and to develop a solution to help the world disinfecting viruses, bacteria, and germs, as well as provide continuous safety for public places and workers in every type of environment. So we took our current technology, which is a unique technology for lighting engines that is being used for other types of solutions that we're already working in other type of environments worldwide. And we have developed a solution that will provide a disinfecting mechanism using the light engine and a mixture of the UV wavelengths. And I will explain about it a little bit in the next few slides. So the fixture itself that we're bringing is actually for any type of business is like a regular fixture. You take off the existing one, you bring in this one, and you get not only high quality lighting with unparalleled uniformity, you get a brighter light, a healthier light with the disinfection and protection within the fixtures. So when you put it within an office, for example, you will have two operating modes. One when there's someone is occupying the room or the area, and this will be with the continuous UVA mixtures with the lighting, providing you continuous safety, continuous disinfecting in specific levels. And when someone is out of the room, we are using even a higher power and a different wavelength mix with UVC that will disinfect and kill the viruses totally. I will share with you the results in a few seconds that we already have. The fixture itself, as you can see from the slide here, meets all the industry standards, and the protection that we're bringing is something that we cannot see in other places in the market. You're all familiar with any UV light that you can buy on Amazon, but these are not professional solutions. They're not professional for lighting. You need anyway additional fixtures to provide additional safety and additional lighting in the room. We are doing it within the same fixture. Thinking about a high-bay solution, think about, for example, a warehouse. We've been talking with warehouses, airports, supermarkets, offices, malls. There are different type of heights, different type of areas, and different types of lighting and disinfection needs for each one of them. So the technology is now being integrated in different type of fixtures to support all the needs. And even in high bays like malls or warehouses, you get the same solution with precision optics, with a total space disinfection, and everything can be manually operated, automatically operated. Everything comes with sensors, so we know if there's someone within the room because some of the functionality, like the UVC functionality, cannot operate when there is a person in the room. So we have Doppler sensors and presence sensors within the fixture on top of the manual operation. So we get notification whether there's someone in the room, and we will not operate this when there's someone in the room, unless it's the UVA functionality that can operate whenever someone in the room. Then this is something that is safe for human and not harmful. So in terms of the technology, you can see here in the slide that in terms of the spectrum and the distribution of spectrum, our lighting solution provides very high quality. And we are incorporating, as I said, the non-visible light functions, which are the UVC and the UVA. We are not incorporating UVB because it's not relevant for disinfecting viruses and bacteria in this case. The UVA is a mitigation protection that can work all the time. So we have illumination, safety, mode 1 when UVA is always working, and mode 2 when we are disinfecting when there's no one in the room. And you can get all the data, the technical data following my presentation. I can share it with everyone as well. The type of mixtures that we're doing with the wavelength is actually helping us, and we tested it in a laboratory test that I will be able to share probably by the end of the week already. We will get the final test result. If you think about the coronavirus that is spread throughout the air, it's actually spread within fluid drops. So it's encapsulated within the drops. And due to the nature of what we are doing with the mixture of the wavelengths, we're able to penetrate the fluid drops, and we are able to kill the virus itself within the fluid drops. That is why we're using this specific wavelength combination. The mixture is what's helping us to do it in this way. So we are both attacking the drops and the viruses by using this combination. So in a way, if you think about a specific area, we are talking about an actual volumetric cleaning, okay? So if you think about a hall, a mall, a warehouse, we are close to 100% disinfecting the area if you're using our technology. These are the intermediate results that we already have. It's from the Bar-Ilan University and the Azrieli Faculty of Medicine within the university. We did an intermediate test with them. As you can see in the result here, we did several tests, and you can see that after using our UVC solution, we got 0 viruses left. We killed them all. What you see on the right on the presentation is the actual plates from the laboratory. And what we already got as an observation from the UVA, that with a continuous UVA, you get a situation where we stop the infection of the viruses. You can see in the lowest part, the activation plate over here. This means that the viruses cannot infect anymore. And if we continue with the UVA even more for a few more hours, they will be dead. We will have the test results with the final formal result that we can share with everyone. We are already talking with large entities worldwide. We are talking with supermarkets, we're talking with warehouses, we're talking with airport authorities. These are different types of fixtures that we need to provide to everyone. And the initial orders that we are talking about will be provided within a month and a half to 2 months from now. I will be happy to share with you any more information, including data sheets and, of course, anything that you would like to know from commercial perspective. I will leave my email at the end of the presentation in the chat room.
Thank you very much, Shai. We're going to have just few Q&A. We have 5 minutes for Q&A, and we actually have interesting questions to address. Just because before addressing the Q&A, I want to highlight that we will have a webinar tomorrow. It's our second part webinar on cybersecurity. This one is in the context of IoT with companies including CyberX, Tetraray, Nanolock, and IXDen. We'll be happy to have you sign up and share this internally. We have another webinar coming up next week with Dan leading the conversation on the world after COVID, innovate or die harder. What are the best practices for corporates to deploy to stay relevant and address these issues? We're going to go through a little bit of Q&A. And first, I wanted to thank everyone for joining and to thank EcoMotion for hosting us as part of the EcoMotion Week. In terms of the questions, some of the questions were mostly related to how do you move from planning how to address these issues to actually addressing the issues, and how quickly are the technologies going to be developed to be integrated at the airport. And I'll just say that we're going to open this question for the three CEOs that we've never seen acceleration of tech development in this space, that our companies are updating their decks continuously, almost daily, with recent results of different tests and different achievements to integrate technologies. But maybe Shai, Asaf, and Tal, can you say just quick words on how quickly you think your technology will be integrated in an actual airport, please? Tal, maybe you can go first.
Yeah, basically the way we're doing it is that we're developing a screening system that will come into the market in 3 phases. The first phase is kind of a rush mode based on the technologies we already have and are already working. And that phase will be something like 6 months to deploy in airports. In order to make that happen, we're also collaborating with all the agencies in the US to make it some kind of an alliance that drive the standard in this space. So we're working, the alliance includes airline companies, Airbus as an aircraft company, DHS, TSA, the Sandia National Lab in the US. So we're working as an alliance within this time frame.
Thank you. Maybe Asaf, you can address integration of SeeTrue.
So SeeTrue's solution is working and doing social distancing as we speak. We see great adoption now from airports around the world. I'm talking just the last 5 days with 3 CEOs of airports to get the systems into their airports. Integration usually took around 10 to 12 weeks, but we're able to reduce it now to 4 to 6 weeks and do most of the work remotely or 100% remotely with some help from the local IT or local partners.
Thank you, Asaf. Shai, maybe you can address integration of Juganu. And I want to also suggest that the crowd here listening to this webinar, if you have ways to promote the integration of these technologies in the airport that you're connected with, feel free to be in touch with us. You have Yakir email on the screen. Shai, maybe you can speak for a minute about Juganu.
Yes, thank you, Lali. We are talking with the Israeli airport authorities, and we are discussing with them the option to bring in the disinfecting solution into the fixtures within the airports. I believe it will take a few more weeks until we understand the current lighting requirements and how many areas they're going to operate, how they're going to operate it. As you already know, in the airports, before the pandemic at least, most of the airports were working almost 24 hours a day. So now, since they're moving to a different type of operation mode with some breaks in between and breaks between the flights, they will probably have some different operation mode, and we will adjust our solution to support their operation mode so they can disinfect highly and faster when there's a break, and we will tailor with them the relevant solution to support them.
Thank you, Shai. I think the other set of questions were more about OurCrowd. Are we launching an aviation fund was one of the questions. So we're actually launching a new pandemic innovation fund that will address innovative technologies that are integrated across different sectors, not only aviation. Many times, as was shown in this webinar, the same technology is integrated across many different sectors, and the development and integration of that technology is very much accelerated in the context of this pandemic. Another question was about other startups that are not OurCrowd portfolio. We actually included many non-portfolio companies in the landscape of the future journey in the airport, and are continuously looking at and working with different startups in the ecosystem to understand their applicability in this context of aviation.
I would also like to add here, maybe, Lali, if I can jump in. I would like to add that we're actually working on a landscape map that is much broader than that, than just the passenger journey. And there we will incorporate all the ecosystem companies that are relevant for the future of the passenger journey as we expect it to be. And I actually saw a question that said that, or Lali actually opened with it, that we might know all the answers to all the questions. Again, like Lali mentioned, this is what we think are the expected journey. This is based on research that we've done in collaboration with airports, with aviation companies, with medical teams that actually explore this day in, day out. So this is not just out of the blue, but this is just, again, an expectation. It could very much change until we get to execution. Another point that I saw is regarding actually something that we didn't discuss here. I just mentioned it in a one line, is immunity passports and health passports. How do we attend to that? So what we've seen so far is that there are already measures being taken by regulators to instate such measures. And of course, there is a lot of privacy issues around such measures, so it should be promoted and pushed by the regulators. The most advanced one, as far as I know, is China already introducing a passenger ranking system where you get a rank based on your like a percentage of how sick you might be. It's not as well executed as it could. It's not based on yet on very extensive medical background. It is something of it's kind of a mix, but it's getting there. And this would definitely, in the long run, would be maybe a prerequisite for online check-in, maybe even for buying a ticket. Depends. So these are just kind of our insights on that.
Thank you very much, Akil, and thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for the presenters. We're happy to stay in touch. We'll follow up with an email with the deck and the recording. Feel free to share this and stay in touch with us with additional questions and join our upcoming webinars. Thank you very much.